The hot summer sun beat down mercilessly on Ryder Adams as he knelt before the freshly mounded earth, his weathered hands clutching the brim of his hat, while tears carved paths through the dust on his cheeks. 3 days had passed since he'd laid his beloved Eliza to rest, victim of a fever that had swept through Silverwood Creek like an autumn wildfire, leaving nothing but ashes and grief in its wake. "You weren't supposed to leave me," he whispered, voice breaking on each word. "Not like this. Not so soon." The year was 1875, and out here in the Montana Territory, death was as common as the sagebrush that dotted the landscape. But that didn't make the sting of loss any less brutal. At 32, Ryder had already endured more than most men twice his age. He'd survived the war between the states, built a modest cattle ranch from nothing but sweat and determination, and somehow convinced the prettiest girl in 3 counties to be his wife. Now she was gone, buried beneath the soil of the land they'd worked together, leaving him utterly alone. Or so he thought. "Mr. Adams?" The soft voice startled him. He hadn't heard anyone approach, too lost in his grief to notice the crunch of boots on the dry earth of the hillside cemetery. Hastily wiping his face with his sleeve, Ryder turned to find a woman standing a respectful distance away. She wore a simple dark blue dress, her honey blonde hair partially hidden beneath a modest bonnet. Her face was kind but somber, green eyes filled with a compassion that made his chest ache. "I'm sorry to intrude on your grief," she said, her voice gentle as a spring breeze. "I'm Lydia Zimmerman. I was the schoolteacher in Briar Ridge before." She paused, glancing toward the town below. "Before the fever took half the town." Ryder nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Briar Ridge was the next settlement over, about 15 miles east. He'd heard the sickness had hit them even harder than Silverwood. "I know what you're feeling," she continued, stepping closer. "I lost my brother last month. Some days, the pain seems impossible to bear." "With all due respect, madam," Ryder said, his voice rough from disuse, "unless you've buried a spouse, you don't know what I'm feeling." Instead of taking offense, Lydia merely nodded. "You're right. I apologize." She moved forward until she stood beside him, looking down at the simple wooden cross marking Eliza's grave. After a moment of silence, she spoke again, her words so soft he almost missed them. "There's still hope, Mr. Adams. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but someday." Ryder wanted to scoff, to tell this stranger that hope was a luxury he could no longer afford. But something in her voice erroneous that spoke of personal suffering overcome stopped him. "How?" he asked simply. "One breath at a time," she answered, meeting his gaze with unwavering certainty. "That's how I've managed since Daniel died. One breath, then another, until breathing doesn't hurt quite so much." The simplicity of her advice struck Ryder like a physical blow. He'd been trying to figure out how to face the rest of his life without Eliza, when perhaps he only needed to focus on the next breath, the next moment. "I've taken a position at the school here in Silverwood," Lydia continued after a respectful pause. "Your town lost its teacher too, I understand." Ryder nodded. "Mrs. Fletcher. Good woman. Taught my wife when she was a girl." "I've heard she was well loved," Lydia said. "I have big shoes to fill." A gust of wind swept across the hillside, bringing with it the scent of pine from the nearby forest. Ryder stood, dusting off his knees. "I should get back to the ranch," he said. "The cattle don't care much if their owner is grieving." Lydia offered a small smile. "No, I suppose they don't." She hesitated, then added, "If you need anything, Mr. Adams, the schoolhouse has a small living quarters attached. I'll be there, should you." She trailed off, seeming unsure how to finish. "Thank you, Miss Zimmerman, but I'll manage." Ryder settled his hat back on his head, tipping it slightly in her direction. "Welcome to Silverwood Creek." As he walked away, Ryder couldn't help but glance back. Lydia remained by Eliza's grave, her head bowed, lips moving in what appeared to be a silent prayer. Something about the sight this stranger paying respects to his wife both comforted and unsettled him. He didn't return to the cemetery for 3 weeks. The demands of the ranch kept him busy from dawn until well after dusk, which suited him fine. Physical exhaustion was preferable to lying awake, staring at the empty side of the bed where Eliza should have been. When he finally did visit her grave again, he found fresh wildflowers arranged in a small glass jar beside the wooden cross. Yellow columbines, Eliza's favorite. Confusion furrowed his brow until he remembered the schoolteacher and her unexpected kindness. The following Sunday, after church service, which he attended only because Eliza would have wanted him to, Ryder spotted Lydia speaking with Sheriff Morgan outside the general store. She looked different today, more vibrant somehow, with her hair loosely pinned and wearing a dress the color of summer wheat. He found himself walking toward her before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted, removing his hat. "Mr. Adams," she replied with a warm smile. "It's good to see you in town." Sheriff Morgan, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, clapped Ryder on the shoulder. "Good to see you among the living, Adams. Was beginning to think you'd become a hermit out there." Ryder managed a tight smile. "Ranch keeps me busy." "Well, I'll leave you two to chat," the sheriff said, tipping his hat to Lydia. "Miss Zimmerman, remember what I said about those Jenkins boys. Don't hesitate to send for me if they give you any trouble." After the sheriff departed, Ryder raised an eyebrow. "Jenkins boys causing problems?" Lydia shrugged. "Nothing I can't handle. Their father's passing has left them angry is all." "Thank you," Ryder said abruptly, "for the flowers on Eliza's grave. The columbines." Surprise flickered across Lydia's face. "How did you know they were from me?" "Lucky guess," he admitted. "But they were her favorite." "How did you know?" "I didn't," Lydia said softly. "They're hardy flowers that grow even in difficult conditions." It seemed appropriate. Ryder nodded, suddenly unsure what to say next. Social niceties had never been his strong suit, and Eliza had usually filled the silence in such situations. "I should let you get back to your Sunday," he finally said. "I just wanted to thank you." "Wait," Lydia said as he turned to leave. "I was planning to visit the cemetery this afternoon. Perhaps we could walk together?" The invitation caught him off guard. Part of him wanted to refuse visiting Eliza's grave, felt intensely private. But there was something about Lydia Zimmerman that made him pause. She wasn't seeking to intrude on his grief. Rather, she seemed to understand it in a way few others did. "All right," he agreed. "I'll meet you here at 3. When they reached the cemetery later that day, Ryder was surprised to see Lydia carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I brought something," she explained, carefully unwrapping what turned out to be 2 slices of apple pie. "Where I come from, we bring food when we visit lost loved ones. My mother always said it helps nourish the memories." The gesture touched Ryder more than he cared to admit. They sat on a patch of grass near Eliza's grave, and he found himself telling Lydia about how he and Eliza had met at a county fair where she'd outshot him in a rifle competition, much to his embarrassment and admiration. "She sounds remarkable," Lydia said, her eyes alight with genuine interest. "She was," Ryder agreed. "Too good for the likes of me, that's for certain." "I doubt that very much, Mr. Adams." "Ryder," he corrected. "If we're going to be sharing pie and memories, you might as well use my given name." Lydia smiled. "Ryder, then." She glanced toward another part of the cemetery. "Would you mind if I visited my brother now?" "Your brother?" Ryder asked, confused. "I thought he died in Briar Ridge." A shadow passed over Lydia's face.
"He did.
But I couldn't bear to leave him there, all alone. When I accepted the position here, I had him moved." Understanding dawned on Ryder. "Of course. I'll come with you if you'd like." As they stood before Daniel Zimmerman's grave, Ryder observed how Lydia's shoulders trembled slightly despite her composed expression. Without thinking, He placed a gentle hand on her back, offering silent support as she had done for him. He was only 24, she said quietly. So full of plans for the future. Ryder nodded, knowing no words could ease such a loss. They stood in companionable silence until the setting sun painted the hillside in hues of gold and amber. That evening, as Ryder rode back to his ranch, he realized he'd spent nearly 3 hours in Lydia's company without once feeling the crushing weight of grief that had been his constant companion since Eliza's death. The realization brought a twinge of guilt, as if he were somehow betraying his wife's memory by finding moments of peace. Yet he couldn't deny that Lydia Zimmerman's presence offered something he desperately needed, not a replacement for what he'd lost, but a reminder that he was still alive. Over the next few weeks, Ryder found himself venturing into town more frequently. Sometimes he'd happen by the schoolhouse as classes were letting out, tipping his hat to Lydia as she stood on the steps bidding farewell to her students. Other times, he'd make a point of attending community gatherings he would have otherwise avoided, knowing she would likely be there. Autumn arrived, painting the countryside in vibrant reds and golds. The Harvest Festival, normally a highlight of Silverwood Creek's social calendar, approached with a mixture of anticipation and dread for Ryder. It would be the first major celebration since Eliza's passing, and the thought of attending without her left a hollow feeling in his chest. The evening before the festival, Ryder was surprised by a knock at his door. Few visitors ventured out to his ranch, especially as dusk approached. He opened the door to find Lydia standing on his porch, looking somewhat apologetic. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, unable to hide his surprise. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," she assured him. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I was delivering schoolbooks to the Peterson children. They live about 2 miles east, and thought I might stop by on my return journey." "Please come in," Ryder said, suddenly aware of the state of his home. While not untidy, the place clearly lacked a woman's touch since Eliza's passing. "Can I offer you coffee? It's fresh made." "That would be lovely, thank you." As Lydia took a seat at his kitchen table, Ryder busied himself with pouring the coffee, grateful for something to do with his hands. "I've been meaning to ask," Lydia said once they were both seated. "Will you be attending the Harvest Festival tomorrow?" Ryder stared into his coffee cup. "I hadn't planned on it." "I understand," she said gently. "Such occasions can be difficult when you're grieving." "It's not just that," Ryder admitted. "Eliza loved the festival. She'd spend weeks preparing our contribution to the community feast. Attending without her feels like a betrayal?" Lydia suggested when he couldn't find the words. Ryder nodded, meeting her gaze with surprise at her perception. "I felt the same way after Daniel died," she continued. "The first time I laughed after his passing, I was consumed with guilt. How dare I find joy when he was gone? But then I realized something important." She leaned forward slightly. "Our loved ones wouldn't want their absence to prevent us from living." Her words struck Ryder with unexpected force. Wasn't that precisely what he'd been doing? Existing rather than living, going through the motions without truly engaging with the world around him? "Besides," Lydia added with a gentle smile, "I've been tasked with organizing the children's activities, and I could use an extra pair of hands. Particularly someone skilled with horses. The children have been begging for pony rides." Ryder couldn't help but chuckle. "Using the town's children to persuade me? That's playing dirty, Miss Zimmerman." Lydia's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Is it working?" "I'll think about it," he conceded, but they both knew he would be there. The Harvest Festival transformed Silverwood Creek's main street into a vibrant celebration of community and abundance. Tables laden with food lined the thoroughfare, while fiddle music filled the air. Children darted between adults, their laughter a counterpoint to the more measured conversations of their elders. True to his word, Ryder arrived early to help Lydia with preparations. He brought along his gentlest mare, Daisy, for the promised pony rides. The delight on the children's faces as he led them around the designated area did more to heal his wounded spirit than he could have imagined. "You have a way with them," Lydia observed during a brief lull in the rides. Ryder shrugged. "Animals are easier to understand than people most days." "I meant the children," she clarified with a smile. "They respond to your patience." Before he could respond, Mrs. Holloway, the mayor's wife and self-appointed social director of Silverwood Creek, approached them with determination. "Miss Zimmerman, Mr. Adams," she greeted, her eyes darting between them with poorly concealed curiosity. "How wonderful to see you both participating in the festivities." "Good afternoon, Mrs. Holloway," Lydia replied warmly. "The festival committee has outdone themselves this year." "Indeed we have," the older woman agreed before fixing her gaze on Ryder. "It's particularly good to see you here, Mr. Adams. We've all been so concerned about you, rattling around that big ranch house all alone." Ryder managed a tight smile, recognizing the not-so-subtle fishing for information. "I appreciate the community's concern, madam." "Well," Mrs. Holloway continued, undeterred, "I do hope you'll join us for the dancing later. Miss Zimmerman has already promised the first set to my nephew Thomas, but I'm sure she could spare a dance for you as well." Ryder glanced at Lydia, who looked momentarily flustered. "I wouldn't want to impose on Miss Zimmerman's dance card," he said diplomatically. "Nonsense," Mrs. Holloway declared. "A handsome widower like yourself should be participating in all aspects of community life. Isn't that right, Miss Zimmerman?" Put on the spot, Lydia nodded. "Of course. Though I should warn you, Mr. Adams, I'm known to step on toes occasionally." "I'll risk it," Ryder found himself saying, surprising even himself with the response. Mrs. Holloway looked positively delighted. "Splendid. The dancing begins at sunset." With that, she bustled away, no doubt eager to share this development with the other town matrons. Once she was out of earshot, Lydia turned to Ryder with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. Mrs. Holloway can be rather persistent." "No need to apologize," Ryder assured her. "Though if you'd prefer not to dance with a clumsy rancher, I won't hold you to it." "On the contrary," Lydia replied, a hint of color rising in her cheeks, "I'd be honored to dance with you, Ryder." The simple statement, delivered with such sincerity, awakened something in Ryder's chest that had been dormant since Eliza's passing, a flutter of anticipation, a spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. As sunset approached, Ryder found himself growing increasingly nervous. He hadn't danced since his and Eliza's wedding day 3 years ago, and the thought of holding another woman in his arms brought a mixture of emotions he wasn't prepared to untangle. He watched from the periphery as Lydia danced with Thomas Holloway, a gangly young man who clearly struggled with the steps despite Lydia's patient guidance. She looked beautiful in a dress of deep forest green, her hair arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual schoolteacher's practical bun. When the music ended and Thomas escorted her from the dance floor, Ryder summoned his courage and approached. "I believe I was promised to dance, Miss Zimmerman," he said, offering his arm. Lydia's smile was radiant as she placed her hand on his forearm. "Indeed you were, Mr. Adams." The musician struck up a waltz, and Ryder led Lydia onto the makeshift dance floor in the center of the street. As he placed his hand at her waist and took her other hand in his, Ryder was acutely aware of the eyes watching them the first time the widower Adams had danced since his wife's passing, and with a new schoolteacher, no less. "Everyone's staring," he muttered as they began to move with the music. "Let them," Lydia replied softly. "People will always talk. It's what they do in small towns." Ryder was surprised to find that his body remembered the steps, guiding Lydia smoothly around the dance floor. "You dance well for someone who claims to step on toes," he observed. Lydia laughed, the sound bright against the music. "I may have exaggerated my clumsiness to lower expectations." "Clever," Ryder said with admiration. As they continued to dance, he found himself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and music. For the first time in months, he felt truly present in the moment, not lost in memories or numbed by grief. When the music ended, Ryder reluctantly released Lydia, already missing the warmth of her nearness. "Thank you for the dance," he said formally, conscious of onlookers. "The pleasure was mine," she replied, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Before they could say more, Sheriff Morgan appeared at Ryder's shoulder. "Adams, got a minute?" "Of course," Ryder replied, turning to Lydia. "Excuse me." The sheriff led him away from the festivities, his expression serious. "Just got word from the territorial marshal. Jasper Reeves broke out of the prison in Helena last week." Ryder felt his blood run cold. "Reeves? Are they sure?" "Positive. Killed a guard in the process." The sheriff lowered his voice. "Thought you should know, given your history with him." Jasper Reeves had been the leader of a gang that had terrorized the Montana Territory 3 years ago. Ryder, along with several other ranchers, had helped the territorial marshals track and capture the outlaws after they'd murdered a family near Silverwood Creek. Reeves had sworn vengeance on all involved in his capture before being sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. "You think he'll come back here?" Ryder asked, glancing instinctively toward Lydia, who was now chatting with some of her students. "Hard to say," Sheriff Morgan replied. "Smart thing would be for him to head for the border." But Reeves never was known for being smart when his pride was wounded. Ryder nodded grimly. "I appreciate the warning, Sheriff. Just watch your back," Morgan advised. "And maybe stay in town tonight. Strength in numbers and all that." But Ryder shook his head. "I've got livestock that needs tending. Can't abandon the ranch." The sheriff didn't look happy but knew better than to argue with a stubborn rancher. "Suit yourself. I've deputized the Peterson boys and Hank Miller to help keep watch. We'll send someone to check on you tomorrow if we don't see you in town." As the sheriff walked away, Ryder felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Lydia looking at him with concern. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "You look troubled." For a moment, Ryder considered keeping the news about Reeves to himself, not wanting to worry her. But something in Lydia's direct gaze told him she wouldn't appreciate being sheltered from the truth. "An outlaw I helped capture a few years back has escaped prison," he explained quietly. Sheriff's concerned he might come looking for revenge. Alarm flashed across Lydia's face. "How dangerous is this man?" "Dangerous enough," Ryder admitted. "But the sheriff has men watching the approaches to town. Most likely, Reeves is halfway to Canada by now." Lydia didn't look convinced. "Perhaps you shouldn't return to your ranch alone tonight." "I'll be fine," Ryder assured her, touched by her concern. "I've weathered worse storms." Lydia studied his face for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," he said, surprised by how much her concern meant to him. "Now, I believe they're setting up for another dance. Would you care to join me?" Lydia's worried expression softened. "I would like that very much." For the remainder of the evening, Ryder pushed thoughts of Jasper Reeves to the back of his mind, choosing instead to focus on the unexpected joy of Lydia's company. They danced twice more, shared apple cider by the bonfire, and talked about everything from favorite books to childhood memories. When the time came to depart, Ryder found himself reluctant to leave. The evening had been a revelation proof that life could still hold moments of happiness despite the shadows of grief and danger. "May I escort you home?" he asked as the festival began to wind down. Lydia smiled. "I would appreciate that." They walked in comfortable silence through the quieting streets of Silverwood Creek until they reached the modest schoolhouse with its attached living quarters. "Thank you for convincing me to attend tonight," Ryder said as they stood on her small porch. "It was healing in a way I didn't expect."
"I'm glad," Lydia replied softly.
Sometimes the hardest step is simply showing up. In the gentle light of the lantern hanging by her door, Lydia's face was cast in a warm glow that emphasized the delicate curve of her cheek, the subtle fullness of her lips. For a brief, startling moment, Ryder found himself wondering what it would be like to kiss her and the thought brought both desire and guilt crashing through him. "Good night, Lydia," he said, taking a step back. "Thank you for the dances." If she was disappointed by his hasty departure, she didn't show it. "Good night, Ryder. Please be careful on your ride home." The journey back to his ranch took longer than usual, as Ryder kept a watchful eye on the darkened landscape around him. By the time he reached home, checked on his livestock, and secured the house, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. Yet as he lay in bed that night, it wasn't thoughts of Jasper Reeves that kept him awake, but memories of Lydia Zimmerman's smile as they danced beneath the harvest moon. Morning brought a sense of normalcy that helped ease Ryder's concerns about Reeves. As days passed without incident, the immediate fear of the escaped outlaw faded, replaced by the more pressing demands of ranch life as winter approached. His friendship with Lydia continued to deepen. They established a routine of Sunday walks after church, sometimes visiting the cemetery together, other times exploring the scenic paths around Silverwood Creek. Occasionally, Ryder would invite her to the ranch for dinner, where she would marvel at the views from his porch and listen with genuine interest as he explained the workings of cattle ranching. It was during one such visit, as November's chill settled across the land, that their relationship shifted irrevocably. Lydia had arrived earlier than expected, carrying a basket of fresh-baked bread and preserves. "I thought I might help with dinner preparations," she explained as Ryder welcomed her inside. They worked together in comfortable companionship, Lydia preparing vegetables while Ryder tended to the venison roast. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the landscape with delicate white. "It's beautiful," Lydia remarked, pausing by the window to watch the snow fall. "I've always loved the first snow. Everything looks so pure, like the world is starting fresh." Ryder moved to stand beside her, their shoulders nearly touching as they gazed out at the transforming landscape. "My father used to say the first snow was God's way of covering up the year's mistakes, giving us a clean slate." Lydia turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you believe that? That we can have a clean slate?" The question held deeper meaning than mere weather philosophy, and they both knew it. Ryder considered his answer carefully. "I'm beginning to," he said finally, meeting her gaze. "For a long time after Eliza died, I couldn't imagine moving forward. The guilt of surviving when she didn't. It was overwhelming. And now?" Lydia asked softly. "Now I'm learning that honoring her memory doesn't mean stopping my own life," Ryder said, the realization crystallizing as he spoke. "She wouldn't have wanted that for me." Lydia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "No, she wouldn't have. Just as Daniel wouldn't want me to stop living either." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, understanding, connection, and the tentative acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing for weeks. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Ryder reached out to touch Lydia's cheek. Her skin was soft beneath his calloused fingers, her eyes closing briefly at the contact. "Lydia," he began, uncertain what he wanted to say, but knowing he needed to say something. Before he could continue, a sharp crack echoed through the air, the unmistakable sound of a rifle shot. Instinct took over as Ryder pulled Lydia away from the window, pushing her toward the center of the room. "Get down," he ordered, his voice tight with tension. Another shot rang out, this one splintering the window frame. Ryder moved quickly, extinguishing the lamps to eliminate their silhouettes against the windows. "What's happening?" Lydia whispered, her face pale in the dimming light. "Reeves," Ryder replied grimly, reaching for his rifle mounted above the fireplace. "Stay low and away from the windows." How do you know it's him?" Lydia asked, following his instructions to crouch behind the solid oak dining table. "I don't for certain," Ryder admitted, checking that his rifle was loaded. "But regular folks around here announce themselves. They don't shoot at windows." A voice called out from the darkness outside, confirming Ryder's suspicion. "Adams, come on out and face me, you yellow-bellied lawman's dog." Ryder's jaw tightened. That's Reeves all right. What do we do? Lydia asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Ryder considered their options. The ranch house was sturdy, built to withstand both weather and potential attacks, with thick walls and defensible positions. But he had no way of knowing how many men Reeves had with him, or how well armed they were. First, we need to get word to town, he said, moving to a trunk in the corner of the room. He pulled out a small mirror and a coal oil lamp. My ranch hand Jake lives about a mile east. If I can signal him, he can ride for the sheriff. How will you signal him in the dark? Lydia asked. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short, Ryder explained, positioning himself near a small rear window. Old army signal for SOS. Jake will recognize it. While Ryder worked on the signal, Lydia took the initiative to gather additional ammunition from the cabinet where she'd seen Ryder store it during previous visits. Her practical response to the crisis impressed him. Many would have succumbed to panic, but Lydia remained clear-headed and focused. Adams. Reeves called again. I know you're in there. Got yourself a woman too, from the looks of it. Maybe when I'm done with you, I'll pay her some special attention. Ryder's blood boiled at the threat, but he kept his composure, continuing to signal until he saw an answering flash from the direction of Jake's cabin. He's seen it, Ryder said with relief, turning back to Lydia. Now, we just need to hold out until help arrives. How long will that take? Lydia asked, helping Ryder barricade the door with furniture. An hour, maybe less if Jake rides hard, Ryder estimated. Sheriff Morgan will bring men as soon as he gets word. Another shot hit the house, this one splintering wood near the doorframe. Ryder motioned for Lydia to stay down as he moved to a position where he could see through a narrow gap in the window shutters. In the dim moonlight filtering through the snowfall, he could make out at least 3 figures taking cover behind his corral fence. I count 3 of them, he told Lydia. Reeves and probably some local thugs he's recruited. They're keeping their distance for now, trying to draw us out. Can't we just wait for the sheriff? Lydia asked. Ryder shook his head grimly. Reeves isn't known for his patience. And the longer we wait, the more likely he is to try something desperate like setting fire to the house. As if on cue, a flaming arrow arced through the air, landing on the porch roof. Ryder cursed, grabbing a blanket and rushing to the window nearest the flames. With careful aim, he fired at the nearest outlaw, then quickly opened the window just enough to use the blanket to beat out the small fire that had started on the porch roof. Another arrow followed, this one missing the house entirely. Ryder used the opportunity to fire again, rewarded with a cry of pain from one of Reeves' men. Got one, he said, returning to Lydia's side behind the overturned table. That might make them more cautious. Or more desperate, Lydia countered, her practical nature asserting itself even in crisis. Ryder had to admire her clear thinking. You're right. We need a better plan than just waiting them out. He thought for a moment, considering the layout of his property and what resources they had available. An idea formed, risky but potentially effective. There's a cellar trapdoor in the pantry, he explained quickly. It leads to a root cellar that has an exit through the hillside behind the house. My father built it as an escape route during the early days when Indian raids were still common. You want us to escape? Lydia asked. Not both of us, Ryder clarified. I need you to go for help, in case Jake didn't understand the signal or runs into trouble on the way to town. Lydia's eyes widened. I'm not leaving you here alone to face 3 armed men. You have to, Ryder insisted. I can hold them off from inside the house, but we need to make sure help comes. Lydia hesitated, clearly torn between the logic of his plan and her reluctance to leave him in danger. What if they rush the house once they realize I'm gone? They won't know you're gone, Ryder assured her. I'll make sure they think we're both still inside. After a moment's consideration, Lydia nodded. Show me this cellar exit. Keeping low, Ryder led her to the pantry and revealed the trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. He lit a small lantern, handing it to her along with his pistol. The tunnel runs about 50 yards and comes out behind that stand of pines to the east, he explained. Once you're clear of the trees, head straight for town. The main road is about a quarter-mile east from where you'll emerge. I know the way, Lydia assured him, checking the pistol with practiced ease that surprised Ryder. You know how to use that? He asked. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. My brother taught me. Said a woman living alone should know how to protect herself. He was a wise man, Ryder said softly. Their eyes met in the dim light of the cellar entrance, and suddenly the danger around them seemed to magnify the emotions that had been building between them for months. Be careful, Ryder, Lydia said, her voice thick with feeling. I couldn't bear to lose you too. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a brief, tender kiss. Then she was gone, descending into the darkness of the cellar with the lantern casting long shadows behind her. Ryder stood frozen for a moment, the warmth of her kiss lingering on his lips. Then the sound of another shot hitting the house jolted him back to the present danger. He secured the trapdoor, replaced the rug, and moved back to his defensive position, calculating how long he needed to keep Reeves and his men occupied to give Lydia enough time to reach safety. For the next 30 minutes, Ryder engaged in a careful exchange of gunfire with the outlaws, making it appear as though two people were defending the house by firing from different windows at irregular intervals. He could tell from the increasing frustration in Reeves' shouts that the outlaw was growing impatient. Adams, Reeves called out. I'm tired of this game. Come out now, or we burn the whole place down with you in it. Ryder didn't respond, conserving his ammunition and waiting. By his estimation, Lydia should have reached the main road by now, possibly even encountered Jake or other travelers who could help. A sudden crash from the rear of the house told Ryder that Reeves had decided to change tactics. The sound of breaking glass was followed by the unmistakable odor of coal oil. They were attempting to set fire to the house from multiple points. Ryder moved quickly through the darkened rooms, firing at shadowy figures whenever he caught glimpses of them approaching the house. He managed to hit one more of Reeves' men, but not before several small fires had been started along the exterior walls. The smoke began to fill the house, making it difficult to breathe. Ryder knew he couldn't remain inside much longer. He would have to make a stand outside or risk suffocation. As he prepared to make a desperate rush from the front door, the distant sound of galloping horses reached his ears. A moment later, multiple voices called out, and a new exchange of gunfire erupted, this time directed away from the house. Adams. It's Sheriff Morgan. Hold on. Relief washed over Ryder. Help had arrived in time. He moved to the door, ready to join the fight, when a searing pain tore through his left shoulder. Turning, he saw Jasper Reeves himself standing in the broken rear window, revolver still aimed at Ryder. Thought you'd escape me, didn't you? Reeves snarled, his face twisted with hatred. Even if they get me, I'll make sure you don't live to see it. As Reeves prepared to fire again, a shot rang out from behind him. The outlaw's expression changed from hatred to surprise as he crumpled forward across the windowsill. Behind him stood Lydia, Ryder's pistol still raised in her steady hands. Lydia, Ryder gasped, pressing his hand to his bleeding shoulder. I thought you were heading to town. I was, she said, climbing carefully through the window to avoid the broken glass. But I met the sheriff's posse on the road. They were already on their way. Jake got through. She rushed to Ryder's side, tearing a strip from her petticoat to create a makeshift bandage for his wound. You're hurt badly. I've had worse, Ryder assured her, though the pain was intense. Is Reeves dead? Lydia confirmed, her voice steady though her hands trembled slightly as she bound his wound. I had no choice. He was going to kill you. Before Ryder could respond, Sheriff Morgan burst through the front door, gun drawn. Taking in the scene quickly, he lowered his weapon. Adams. Miss Zimmerman. Are you all right? "We need a doctor," Lydia answered, supporting Ryder as he swayed slightly from blood loss. "Mr. Adams has been shot." The next hours passed in a blur for Ryder. He was vaguely aware of being loaded into a wagon, of Lydia's constant presence at his side, of Dr. Harrison extracting the bullet from his shoulder in the town's small medical office. Through it all, one thought remained clear: Lydia had saved his life, risking her own to return for him instead of continuing to safety. When he finally regained full consciousness, it was morning. He found himself in a bed in the doctor's back room, his shoulder heavily bandaged and throbbing with a dull ache. Lydia was seated in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on her arms at the edge of the mattress, asleep. Ryder studied her peaceful face, strands of honey blonde hair escaping from her once neat bun. Despite the ordeal they'd endured, despite the fact that she had been forced to take a man's life to save his, there was a serenity to her expression that touched something deep within him. As if sensing his gaze, Lydia stirred, lifting her head. When she saw that he was awake, relief flooded her features. "Ryder," she breathed, reaching for his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," he replied with a weak attempt at humor. "But alive, thanks to you." Lydia shook her head. "I couldn't leave you. Not when I realized I might never see you again." The simple honesty of her words struck Ryder more powerfully than any eloquent declaration could have. In that moment, with morning sunlight streaming through the small window and the sounds of the awakening town outside, Ryder Adams realized he had fallen in love with Lydia Zimmerman. "I'm glad you came back," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "Though I wish you hadn't put yourself in danger." "I made a choice," Lydia replied firmly. "Just as you did when you decided to stay behind." Dr. Harrison's arrival interrupted their conversation. After examining Ryder's wound and declaring it to be healing well, he delivered news about the previous night's events. "Sheriff got the other 2 members of Reeves' gang," he explained. "One dead, one wounded, but likely to survive long enough to hang. The territorial marshal's already been notified." "And my ranch?" Ryder asked. "Some fire damage to the exterior, but your ranch hands got it under control quickly," the doctor assured him. "Jake's been seeing to your livestock." "Thank you, doctor," Ryder said with genuine gratitude. After the doctor left, promising to return later with more pain medication, Ryder turned back to Lydia. "You should get some rest," he told her. "You've been here all night." Lydia shook her head stubbornly. "I'm not leaving your side, Ryder Adams. Not until I'm certain you're going to be all right." Her determination brought a smile to his face. "Has anyone ever told you that you're remarkably stubborn, Miss Zimmerman?" "Frequently," she replied with a tired smile of her own. "Usually right before they realize I'm also right." Ryder laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his injured shoulder. "I won't argue with that, but at least let me move over, so you can rest properly." Despite her protests, he shifted carefully to one side of the narrow bed. After a moment's hesitation, Lydia relented, removing her shoes and lying down beside him, careful not to disturb his bandaged shoulder. "This is highly improper," she murmured, though she made no move to leave. "I reckon we're past worrying about propriety," Ryder replied, savoring the comforting warmth of her beside him. "Not after what we've been through together." Lydia sighed, her body relaxing against his. "I suppose you're right. Though Mrs. Holloway would have an apoplexy if she could see us now." The mental image of the town's most proper matron discovering them like this brought a chuckle from both of them. As their laughter faded, a comfortable silence settled between them. "Ryder," Lydia said after a while, her voice soft and serious. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" he asked, sensing her hesitation. "When I saw Reeves about to shoot you again," she began, "I felt such fear not just of losing someone else I care about, but of losing you specifically. Of losing the chance to discover what might be between us." She paused, gathering courage. "I've developed feelings for you. Feelings that go beyond friendship. I know it might be too soon after Eliza, And I would understand if Ryder gently placed a finger against her lips, stopping her words. It's not too soon, he said quietly. I've been fighting my feelings for you for months, telling myself it was disloyal to Eliza's memory. But last night, when I thought I might die without ever telling you how I feel, I realized I was being disloyal to myself and to the future she would have wanted for me. Lydia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And how do you feel? Instead of answering with words, Ryder leaned forward carefully, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, and kissed her. Unlike their hurried kiss in the cellar, this one was slow and deliberate, a promise rather than a goodbye. When they finally parted, Ryder smiled at the wonder in Lydia's eyes. Does that answer your question? She nodded, a single tear escaping to trail down her cheek. It does. Though the school board might have something to say about their teacher being involved with a rancher of questionable reputation. Questionable reputation? Ryder asked, feigning offense. I'll have you know I'm considered quite respectable in these parts. When I'm not being shot at by escaped outlaws, that is. Lydia laughed, the sound brightening the small room.
We'll have to work on that.
Perhaps attending more social functions would help. If you'll be there, Ryder said, his tone turning serious, I'll attend every social function from here to Helena. Their recovery and courtship progressed in tandem over the following weeks. As winter settled fully across the Montana Territory, blanketing Silverwood Creek in snow, Ryder's shoulder healed while his relationship with Lydia deepened. They made no secret of their affection, attending church together and often seen in each other's company around town. There was talk, of course speculation about whether it was too soon after Eliza's passing, whispers about the propriety of a schoolteacher being so publicly attached to a widower. But such gossip faded in the face of the genuine happiness evident between them and the community's general agreement that Ryder Adams deserved a second chance at happiness after his loss. The damaged sections of Ryder's ranch house were repaired, with many townspeople volunteering their help and gratitude for his and Lydia's roles in ending the threat Jasper Reeves had posed to their community. During the repairs, Ryder stayed in town, renting a room above the general store and taking his meals at the small hotel where he could visit with Lydia every evening. As Christmas approached, bringing with it the promise of holiday celebrations and renewed community spirit, Ryder found himself planning for a future he couldn't have imagined just months earlier. He spent several days in careful preparation, consulting with the town jeweler and seeking advice from Sheriff Morgan, who had become a trusted friend during the aftermath of the Reeves incident. On Christmas Eve, following the traditional service at Silverwood Creek's small church, Ryder invited Lydia to join him for a sleigh ride back to his ranch, which she had not visited since the night of the attack. The air was crisp and clear, stars shining brilliantly in the vast Montana sky as Ryder's horses pulled the sleigh smoothly over the snow-covered landscape. It's beautiful, Lydia said, nestled close beside him beneath warm blankets. Like something from a fairy tale. Wait until you see the house, Ryder replied, a hint of nervous anticipation in his voice. Jake and I have been working on something special. As they crested the final hill, Ryder's ranch came into view. Lydia gasped in delight. The house was aglow with lantern light, with pine boughs adorning the porch and a Christmas tree visible through the front window. It looked nothing like the bullet-riddled, smoke-damaged structure she had last seen. Oh, Ryder, she breathed. It's wonderful. He helped her from the sleigh, leading her up the cleared path to the porch. Before entering, he paused, turning to face her. Lydia, he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Before we go inside, there's something I need to ask you. Understanding dawned in her eyes as Ryder reached into his coat pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Despite the cold, he removed his glove before taking her hand in his. These past months have taught me that life can change in an instant for worse or for better, he said, his voice growing steady as he continued. Losing Eliza showed me how fragile happiness can be. But finding you, that showed me how resilient the heart truly is, how capable it is of healing and loving again. Lydia's eyes glistened with tears as she watched him kneel in the snow before her. I never expected to feel this way again, Ryder continued, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. To find someone who understands both my grief and my hope for the future. Someone who stands beside me in danger and in peace. Someone who whispers hope when all seems lost. He took a deep breath, the cloud of his exhale visible in the cold night air. Lydia Zimmerman, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? For a moment, Lydia stood silent, one gloved hand pressed to her lips. Then, with tears streaming freely down her cheeks, she nodded. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Ryder Adams. I will marry you. With hands that trembled slightly from emotion rather than cold, Ryder slipped the ring onto her finger over her glove, promising a proper fitting later. Then he stood, gathering her into his arms and kissing her beneath the star-filled Montana sky. As they entered the warmth of the house together, Lydia marveled at the transformation. The interior had been not merely repaired but renewed, with fresh paint and new curtains that somehow maintained the character of the home while erasing the scars of that violent night. In the center of the main room stood a pine tree decorated with paper stars, candles, and a few cherished ornaments that had survived the generations. Beneath it were 2 packages wrapped in brown paper and tied with red ribbon. Christmas gifts already? Lydia asked with delight. One of them, Ryder confirmed, leading her to a comfortable chair near the crackling fireplace. The other is something else entirely. After helping her remove her coat and ensuring she was comfortably warm, Ryder retrieved the larger of the 2 packages. He placed it carefully in her lap, an unexpected nervousness evident in his movements. Open this one first, he instructed, taking a seat across from her. Curious, Lydia untied the ribbon and carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a leather-bound Bible. Opening the cover, she found an inscription on the flyleaf. To my beloved wife Eliza, on our wedding day. May God's word guide our path together. Lydia looked up at Ryder, understanding the significance of what he was sharing with her. This was Eliza's, she said softly. Ryder nodded. One of the few personal items I managed to save from the fire. I wanted you to have it. Ryder, I couldn't possibly, please, he interrupted gently. Eliza would have wanted her Bible to be used, to continue providing comfort and guidance. And I believe she would approve of it passing to you. Tears welled in Lydia's eyes as she carefully closed the Bible, running her fingers over its worn leather cover. Thank you. I'll treasure it always. Ryder reached for the second package, smaller than the first. This one is less solemn, I promise. Inside was a beautifully carved wooden music box. When Lydia opened it, a sweet melody played as a tiny painted couple danced in circles. It's beautiful, she said, watching the figurines spin to the music. I commissioned it for Mr. Thornton, Ryder explained, referring to the town's woodworker. The tune is the waltz we first danced to at the Harvest Festival. Lydia closed the music box carefully and set it aside, then moved to kneel beside Ryder's chair, taking his hands in hers. I have no gift for you, she said, regret in her voice. I wasn't expecting. You've already given me the greatest gift possible, Ryder assured her. You brought hope back into my life when I thought it was lost forever. As they sat before the fire, planning their future together, Ryder felt a sense of peace settle over him. The grief of losing Eliza would always be part of him, a shadow that occasionally darkened his days. But now that shadow was balanced by the light Lydia had brought into his life, a different love, not replacing what was lost but creating something new and equally precious. Spring arrived in Silverwood Creek with its customary burst of renewal wildflowers painting the hillsides in vibrant colors, cattle grazing on fresh green grass, and the sound of children's laughter as they played outdoors after the long winter confinement. For Ryder and Lydia, spring brought their wedding day. The ceremony was held on the first Sunday in May, with the entire town turning out to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the rancher whose relationship had captured their collective imagination. Lydia wore a dress of ivory silk ordered specially from Helena, her honey blonde hair adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. Ryder, uncharacteristically formal in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar of the small church, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awe as she walked down the aisle toward him. Sheriff Morgan stood as Ryder's best man, while Mrs. Holloway's niece Clara served as Lydia's maid of honor. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with Reverend Thompson speaking eloquently about second chances and the divine nature of love that heals wounded hearts. When it came time for their vows, Ryder took Lydia's hands in his voice steady and clear as he promised to cherish and protect her all the days of his life. Lydia's response was equally heartfelt, her promise to stand beside him through all of life's joys and sorrows bringing tears to many eyes in the congregation. The celebration afterwards spilled out from the church onto the main street, with tables laden with food prepared by the women of the town and music provided by local fiddlers. Children darted between adults, dogs barked excitedly at the commotion, and even the most reserved members of the community found themselves tapping their feet to the lively tunes. As evening approached and the celebration continued, Ryder led Lydia away from the crowds to a quiet spot behind the church. From this vantage point, they could see the entire town below them and, in the distance, the cemetery where Eliza and Daniel rested. "Are you happy?" Ryder asked, his arm around her waist. Lydia leaned her head against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible again," she answered honestly. "And you?" "Completely," he assured her. "Though I can't help thinking of them today." "As do I," Lydia admitted. "I've been feeling Daniel's absence all day, wishing he could have been here to see me so happy." "I believe they know," Ryder said softly. "And I believe they're at peace, knowing we've found each other." Lydia nodded, wiping away a tear. "I like to think so, too." They stood in silence for a moment, honoring the memories of those they had lost while embracing the future they would build together. Then, from the town below, they heard their names being called. "Mr. and Mrs. Adams, where have you gone? It's time for the special dance." Lydia laughed, the sound bright with happiness. "Shall we, Mr. Adams?" "We shall indeed, Mrs. Adams," Ryder replied, offering his arm with a flourish. As they returned to their wedding celebration, Ryder reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of grief beside Eliza's grave to the heights of joy on his wedding day, the path had been neither straight nor easy. Yet every step had led him here, to this woman who had stood beside him in his darkest hour and whispered hope when he needed it most. 5 years later, the Adams ranch had flourished beyond Ryder's most optimistic expectations. With Lydia's practical business sense complementing his knowledge of cattle and land management, they had expanded their holdings and established one of the most successful operations in the territory. Their personal happiness had grown equally rich. 3-year-old Daniel, named for Lydia's brother, toddled after his father with determined steps as Ryder went about his morning chores. 1-year-old Elizabeth, bearing her predecessor's name with Lydia's honey-blonde curls, watched from her mother's arms as Lydia supervised the planting of the kitchen garden. The expanded ranch house echoed with children's laughter and the warmth of family life. Ryder had built additional rooms as their family grew, including a dedicated schoolroom where Lydia continued to teach, now instructing not only their own children, but those of neighboring ranchers who traveled for weekly lessons. On a warm June morning, as the family gathered for breakfast, a rider appeared on the horizon. Ryder recognized the posture of Sheriff Morgan, now showing his age with silver-streaked hair and a slight stoop to his shoulders. "Look who's coming, Daniel," Ryder said, lifting his son to see out the window. "It's Uncle Jim." The boy clapped his hands excitedly. Sheriff Morgan was a favorite visitor, always arriving with peppermint sticks hidden in his pockets and stories of his lawman days that fascinated young Daniel. Lydia appeared from the kitchen, Elizabeth on her hip. "Breakfast is ready. Will the sheriff be joining us?" "I expect so," Ryder replied, setting Daniel down. "Probably bringing news from town." When Morgan arrived, he indeed carried news the territorial governor would be visiting Silverwood Creek the following month, and he wanted the Adams family to host a dinner at their ranch for the dignitary. "The governor specifically asked to meet you both," Morgan explained as he bounced Elizabeth on his knee. "Word of how you handled the Reeves situation has spread, and he's interested in your views on law enforcement in the territory's more remote areas." Lydia exchanged a look with Ryder, both surprised by the request. "We'd be honored," she said after a moment. "Though I'm not sure our humble ranch is suited for entertaining a governor." Morgan chuckled. "Humble? This is the finest spread within 100 miles, and everyone knows it. Besides, the governor isn't looking for fancy city accommodations. He wants to see the real Montana territory." After the sheriff departed, promising to return with more details about the visit, Ryder and Lydia sat on their porch swing while the children napped inside. "A governor," Lydia mused, shaking her head in wonder. "If someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd be hosting a territorial governor in my home, I'd have thought them mad. If someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd be happily married with 2 beautiful children, I'd have thought the same," Ryder replied, taking her hand in his. "Life has a way of surprising us." Lydia's expression grew thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on love again after such loss?" Ryder considered the question seriously, as was his nature. "Not for a single moment," he finally answered. "Grief is the price we pay for love. That's true enough. But love is worth that price, every time." He gazed out at the ranch they had built together, the flourishing garden, the healthy cattle grazing in distant fields, the new barn raised with the help of neighbors last autumn. But most of all, he thought of the sounds of their children's laughter, of Lydia's voice reading stories by lamplight, of the quiet conversations they shared in the privacy of their bedroom each night. "When you found me at Eliza's grave that day," he continued, "I thought my life was over. Everything that mattered was buried in that ground." He squeezed her hand gently. "But you showed me that life continues, that the heart can heal and grow and love again." Lydia leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture so familiar now that it felt like an extension of himself. "I needed that lesson too," she admitted. "After Daniel died, I thought I'd spend my life alone, dedicated to my teaching and nothing more." From inside the house came the sound of Elizabeth's cries, followed by Daniel's louder voice calling for his mother. Lydia smiled, rising from the swing. "Duty calls," she said, leaning down to kiss Ryder briefly. "I'll start dinner early, if we're to plan for a governor's visit." As she walked inside, Ryder remained on the porch, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. His thoughts drifted to that day at the cemetery, to the tears he'd shed over Eliza's grave, and the unexpected appearance of the woman who had become his second chance at happiness. He sometimes visited the cemetery still, though less frequently as the years passed. He would tell Eliza about the children, about the ranch, about the life he had built with Lydia. He liked to think she would be pleased for him, just as he believed Daniel would be happy for his sister's joy. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, Ryder and Lydia sat at the kitchen table, planning for the governor's visit. Lists of food to prepare, accommodations to arrange, and neighbors to invite for the dinner filled pages of Lydia's neat handwriting. "Do you think we should invite the new schoolteacher?" Lydia asked, tapping her pencil against the page. "Miss Peterson seems quite knowledgeable about territorial politics." Ryder nodded his agreement, watching his wife with undisguised admiration. In the lamplight, with tendrils of honey blonde hair escaping from her bun and her brow furrowed in concentration, She looked as beautiful to him as she had on their wedding day. "What are you staring at?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Just counting my blessings," he replied with a smile. Lydia set down her pencil and reached across the table to take his hand. "As am I, Ryder Adams. As am I." Later, as they prepared for bed, Ryder paused by the window, looking out at the star-filled Montana sky. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the grief that had nearly consumed him, the unexpected second chance at love, the family he now cherished beyond measure. Life in the West was never easy. It demanded resilience, courage, and the willingness to begin again after loss. But as Ryder turned from the window to embrace his wife, he knew with absolute certainty that every tear shed, every hardship endured, had been worth it for the joy he now held in his arms. "I love you, Lydia Adams," he whispered against her hair. "And I love you," she replied, her voice carrying the same certainty it had that day by Eliza's grave when she had first whispered hope to a broken-hearted widower. Outside their window, the Montana night stretched vast and beautiful, stars glittering like promises in the endless sky. Inside, the warmth of family and love created a sanctuary against whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. For Ryder and Lydia Adams, that was more than enough. It was everything.